Hey y'all, this is Daaro Diaz. Welcome everybody back to a potential finale episode of the acclaimed visual novel series Higurashi When They Cry. This is chapter 1, Onikakushi. And last episode was a while back. The last time we were here, we had just found out that our friends weren't exactly who they seemed they were. And it looked like things are looking bleak for our main character. And when they tell us not to transfer out, don't transfer out, as Rena told us last time we were here. It's looking very, very mysterious, very bleak. But I hope you guys are ready for this very interesting episode as we continue. All my well-planned actions throughout the day turned out to have been nothing more than a reenactment of what Satoshi had done. Satoshi, had he really been in the same situation as I was now? The friends he had gotten along the way had suddenly changed, and for no reason, at least none that I had noticed, planned to kill him? Then, fearing for his life as I am, he got a bat to protect himself and carried it around every day to practice his swing. And then one day, suddenly, he transferred. My blood went cold, causing a prickling sensation to course throughout my veins. Starting near my heart, it radiated outwards from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, chilling every part of me without recourse. What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Was Satoshi still at wherever he was transferred to? Was he the only one who could have been able to understand me? Would he be able to tell me why it ended up all like this? More importantly, where did he transfer to? What did she mean by transfer? What did she mean by transfer? Before I knew it, I was at my front door. The frigid doorknob was hard to turn. Was nobody home? It wasn't odd for an occurrence as I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single key attached to the fur seal keychain. I stepped into the entryway, and just as I was about to take off my shoes, a chill ran down my spine. Someone had entered right behind me. Like a classmate messing around, standing right up against my back. You're kidding, right? It had to be my imagination. Logically speaking, it was impossible for someone to be able to hide their presence within my personal space all the way through the door. But there was undoubtedly someone behind me. Hey now, Keiichi. How do you know they're there even though they're behind you? Because I could hear the sound of flowing hair. There's no other reason I'd hear that sound. That was the presence. Because I could hear the sound of them blinking. Keiichi Maebara, there's no way you could hear that. My most base instincts were warning me of the presence. Common sense was telling me that it was just my imagination. It was just my imagination. There was nobody behind me. I began to erase the mental image of an eerie figure standing behind me. But at the same time, I asked myself if there was nobody If there was nobody, then what was I feeling? As an uncomfortable sensation crawled up my spine. Actually, wouldn't it be better if there was somebody there? If there was nobody there when you turned around, would you be able to accept that? I'd be able to answer all those questions just by looking behind me. But I didn't have enough courage to even do that simple task. All right, I could try speaking to them. The person behind me might answer me. There was a random thought. I didn't know how I went about it, just so as long as I didn't have to turn around. If I had calmed down and thought about it, I would have known that I wouldn't have solved anything.
どなたですか?
Uh-oh. I spoke in such a hoarse, broken voice that I couldn't believe it was my own. I could almost feel them contemplating their response. I felt it. There's no way I should be able to do that. Calm down, Keiichi. It's all in your head. That time, I was certain I heard it. As if hesitantly trying to answer my inquiry, I was certain I could hear the sound of somebody inhaling. I heard it. I heard it. I heard it clearly. It was a girl. A young girl. I didn't know who, but a tiny speck of courage in me, however reckless it was, inspired a primal yet fitting solution to this current predicament, a scream. All the force of my body released from my lungs and throughout my throat, ceasing all thought process in my head. Suppressing all my thoughts and emotions, I began to collapse like a house of cards, somehow managing to twist my body and look back as I did so. It was definitely there. Right there. Somebody was there. Until the moment I turned around, until I brought the area behind me into my field of vision, they were definitely there. Falling face up. My eyes traced the remnants of a presence suspended in empty space. It couldn't be. They were invisible. They looked like they weren't there, but they were actually still standing there? As I scrambled, all the emotions I was holding back burst free in a violent wave. However, I was decidedly calm as my emotional dam collapsed. The turbulent wave of pent-up emotions was skillfully diverted into a torrent of aggression. The emotion was definitely required to accentuate myself in the bizarre situation happening right in front of me. In my state of heightened lucidity, I entrusted my body to the fury. The metal bat held firm in my right hand as if drawn there by a magnet. A mid-level sweep would be the hardest attack to dodge. I remembered reading something like that from a book about swordsmanship or something. I brandished my will to fight. The after image of that amalgamation of metal flashed as it swung from left to right, beating against the entryway. The bat slammed into the right wall, the tip rebounding violently. Very calmly, I transferred the force of the rebound into a sweep to the left. The door of the shoe cupboard was split into pieces. Those two swings whipped through empty space, but they seemed to have a great psychological impact on the enemy. I could feel the panic emanating from that space. The attack wasn't the only thing required. I extracted the bat from the cupboard as it was embedded in and screamed as I spun my entire body around in a large arc. Okay, Keiichi, calm down. My screams shook the air, imbuing my ferocious swing with even more destructive power. Without mercy or restraint, my violent strike with certainly fatal force behind it shattered the top of the cupboard. None of my attacks struck the enemy, but my ferocity had certainly seemed to impact them. Breathing heavily, my entire body soaked in sweat, the invisible enemy there, but not there, dispersed. When I was certain that the enemy had retreated, I locked the front door and latched the chain. No way had it only feigned retreat and was now inside my house. Once again, I channeled my aggression and searched the house for the presence, but it was gone. I had succeeded in fending it off. At that moment, the tension drained from my body, and I let out a deep sigh of relief. All the emotions I had been holding back chaotically merged together. Had began to flood out in a hodgepodge of fear, accomplishment, and disbelief, all mixed together and began to flow throughout my body. Unable to deal with in each individual feeling, I beat them all back with the strongest exhaustion. Even in this moment, I remained composed. After checking all the doors throughout the house were locked, I went up to my room on the second floor and closed the curtains. I straightened my back and tilted my head a little after clearing my mind of all the idle thoughts. I managed to calm down even more. What was that at the front door? There was definitely something there. Thinking about it, maybe it was just an apparition I dreamt up in my confused state. But I really didn't think that was the case. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. Compose yourself. But no matter how calmly I thought about it, what just happened wasn't a figment of my imagination. It was obviously a supernatural phenomenon, and without a doubt, something was behind me. It wasn't some sort of illusion I saw amidst my confusion and disorientation. Proof? I had just one piece. When I asked, "Who is it?" they inhaled as if they were about to answer. That sound had clearly reached my ears. The situation I was in right now was still unclear. Either I had been possessed by the supernatural phenomenon known as Oyashiro-sama's curse, or this was a ruse by the villagers who believed in it and were imitating it. Either way, their motives were unclear. Their roundabout way had it been done was also still a mystery. If it was perpetrated by humans, that would mean admitting that it was Rena and the rest of them doing it, but it would still be solvable. Oishi-san and the rest of the police would surely arrest my enemy. But if it was a manifestation of Oyashiro-sama's curse, I wondered what would happen. Oishi-san would very clearly declare that curses didn't exist. At the time, those words were pretty dependable, but as things were now, with a rising possibility that the perpetrators were not human, he suddenly seemed quite unreliable. If I told Oishi-san this was the work of Oyashiro-sama's curse, what would happen? I couldn't imagine his reaction, but it would go without question that a void would expand rapidly between myself and Oishi-san. With me having so few allies to begin with, and not being able to confidently declare whether or not this was a curse, there was no merit to doing that. I better keep the facts of what just happened at the doorway to myself. It would be better if I didn't add what happened there to the memo behind the clock. There was still the ever so slightly possibility that I was actually confused when I thought I was composed, and I was just going berserk in the entryway. How wonderful would that be if that really happened? I would be able to refute Oyashiro-sama's curse. But if I denied Oyashiro-sama's curse, then that would mean admitting that Rena and the rest were the perpetrators. If I said that Rena and the rest weren't the perpetrators, then that would mean believing in Oyashiro-sama's curse. By denying both of those, I would be admitting that I myself was losing it. The three options from which I couldn't choose became a trilemma of sorts. They mixed together and formed a whirlpool in my mind, making my head spin. Once again, I straightened myself and leaned my head back slightly to cool myself down. Calm down, Keiichi. Accept what actually has happened as reality. Stop thinking of anything more than that. But I couldn't help but think of it. How wonderful would it be if it turned out that I was delirious and everything up till now was a figment of my imagination? Oyashiro-sama's curse wouldn't exist, and I would still be bestest buddies with Rena and the rest. I would have to be crazy. That was the first time in my life I'd ever wished for such a thing. Oh, God. I can already getting chills now. This is awesome. The phone rang noisily downstairs. Generally, there were no calls for me, so I never really answered the phone much. But since my parents weren't home, I had no choice. I squirmed off the bed and went downstairs.
もしもし、前原です。
ケイチ、お母さんだけど。
I intuitively had a bad feeling about this. It was because I thought she was going to ask me to go out and buy some things. So I took the initiative.
何？別に俺、夕食はインスタントでもいいよ。まだいっぱいあったでしょ。
The other day, we went out as a family and bought a whole case of cup noodles. I wanted to get a bunch of different kinds, but actually they refused since the individual packs were expensive. So instead, I got a whole case of the mega-sized pork loin and ginger-flavored ones I liked. But my parents don't like strong flavors, and they didn't touch any of them. So the cupboards were still full of them.
だからさ、買い物に行く必要はないんじゃないの？
ケイチ、買い物のお願いじゃないの。お父さんとお母さんね、お仕事の関係で急遽東京に行かなくちゃならなくなったの。
今から？
This was really abrupt.
もう着いちゃってるの。お昼には出発してたからね。
It's quite a distance from Tokyo to Hinamizawa. Running full speed down the highway would still take 6 hours. Dad has a license, but he doesn't like the highway. They likely took the train. It would have taken longer.
ケイチもお父さんとお母さんの話を聞いてたからわかるかもしれないけど、お父さんのお仕事の契約がね、今ちょっとうまくいってないの。
Now that she mentions it, I did remember that they talked all the time about how his job prospects weren't looking so good.
お父さんはそういうのに繊細な人だから、このままだとお仕事にも影響が出ちゃうの。
Part of my father's particular fragile artistic personality, his emotions changed as easily as the fall sky. You could also say he couldn't take criticism.
でもそんなの電話でやり取りすればいいじゃないか。
ケイチ、お父さんのお仕事なんだから、もうちょっと応援してあげてね。とにかく電話よりも直接会って話した方が早いの。誤解もないし。
As her son, there was nothing more I could say once they started talking about work.
だから帰るのは明日の晩になっちゃうの。ケイチ、一人で大丈夫よね。
別に死にゃしないよ。
ケイチ、死んじゃうなんて軽々しく言っちゃダメよ。心配事があったら相談してね。母さん、きっと相談に乗れると思うから。
Yesterday, I did bring up if I died rather abruptly, so I suppose they were a little worried. But really, I was more depressed by the fact that nothing would be solved by telling them. I didn't plan on dying. At least not while I still knew nothing. I would never allow it.
死なないよ。俺はあがいてでも生き延びる。
そう。じゃあね。明日の朝、ちゃんと起きるのよ。朝ごはんは食べてね。お風呂と歯磨きも忘れないのよ。
へいへい。そんじゃ。
And the call ended just like that. Sometimes my parents went off to Tokyo for business meetings. Tokyo was far away. They normally did things by phone. The times they did go were normally planned out in advance. It never happened this suddenly. I couldn't say those circumstances didn't feel strange, or rather, unnatural. Anyway, I only needed to recognize the reality of the situation. That tonight, I was the only one in the house. When my parents came back from work, I'd be gone, missing, vanished. Looking back on the series of events in the previous 5 years involving the Oyashiro-sama curse, it wouldn't have seemed that strange at all. Come to think of it, it was getting pretty late. I didn't think it was good that the only light on in the whole house was from my room on the second floor. It was the same as the broadcasting to the enemy that my parents were gone, and this was their chance. First, I ran into the living room and flicked on the lights and turned on the TV to a reassuring volume. Next was the study. I similarly turned the lights on and some music. With this, from the outside, it would look like my parents were here. Once again, I went throughout the house, checking to see if there was anything left unlocked. When I saw the veranda and the laundry still hanging out there, I went pale. That would have made it too obvious. I need to take it down. I snatched down the laundry haphazardly and erased all the traces of my mother wasn't there. It should be fine now. The garage. They hadn't gone all the way to Tokyo by car, but they had gone up to the Okinomiya station. The garage was empty, wide open, and in plain sight. This was not good. I panicked and rushed out to the back to close the normally open garage door. It should be fine now. Oh my god, he's like going insane right now. I need to get the paper. Mom always got the paper since it left this afternoon. The evening paper was still out there. My premonition was correct. I pulled out everything from the mailbox and dropped it into the entryway. With this for sure this time, it should be fine. Come to think of it, leaving the cupboard busted like that from that little freak out was kind of bad. I'll just say I tripped and fell, and the bat I was holding smashed into it. Even so, just leaving it in its current state wasn't good. I should clean it up and a little before Mom gets back and scolds me. Oh. That blasted phone again. How dare it ring?
もしもし、前原です。
あら、ケイイチくん、
Uh-oh.
お母様はいらっしゃいますかしら。
今ちょっといないんですけど。
You idiot, Keiichi Maebara. Don't reveal that your parents are gone. You can still follow it up. Calm down and take care of it.
すぐに戻ると思います。
なら結構です。大した話でもありませんから。では失礼しますわね。
The scenario I feared didn't play out, eliciting a sigh of relief. That call was fortunate in more ways than one. I'd have to deal with any telephone calls coming in from my parents tonight. I was somehow able to deal with the phone call just now, but I couldn't continue to rely on such poor improvisation. I needed to make up a good story to explain that my parents were home but couldn't answer the phone at the moment. They were making tempura and couldn't step away right now. That wasn't good enough. They were sick and went to bed because they weren't feeling well. Was that going to be safe enough? Oh my gosh. I was thinking about it on the way back to my room when the phone rang once again. It was like they were calling because they knew I was going to lie. I didn't want to pick it up, but I knew I had to. They'd suspect my parents weren't here. I should have just taken the phone off the hook in pretense that I didn't realize that it was. But since the phone rang, I had to pick it up. I prepared myself and lifted up the receiver.
もしもし。
Unlike my previous uncouth voice, the person on the side sounded groovy, goofy, and lighthearted. Oh, it's Oishi-san.
私、沖宮書房の大石と申しますが。
大石さんですか。
前原さんですか。こんばんは。お元気そうで何よりです。
ちょっと待ってくださいね。
I grabbed the portable headset and rushed up to my room with it. It was the same no matter where I was since there was no one else home, but I wanted to be in a spot I felt just a bit safer when speaking on the phone with Oishi-san.
お待たせしました。
いかがですか、その後お変わりは。
Since then, when was that exactly? There was something about the brazen way he talked that rubbed me the wrong way. The last time I spoke with Oishi-san was 2 days ago. The day I stayed home from school and met Oishi-san on the way back from the hospital. And we headed into town for lunch and had a talk. And then after that, Rena and Mion came to check up on me. Whenever I spoke to Oishi-san, they always knew about it. It was like that since the first time I met him. Today's phone call may well have been found out by them as well.
もしもし、聞こえてますか、前原さん。
すみません。なんて言いました？
その後、何か変わったことはありませんかとお尋ねしたんです。お返事がないんで焦りましたよ。
特には。
The words stopped in my throat. There was a ton of stuff that happened. All of it baffling. What should I talk about? I didn't understand any of it, but I should try asking. If I didn't ask now, I may never have another chance. This night, when my parents aren't home, had no guarantees I would make it through the night safely, after all.
その大石さん、やっぱり俺命を狙われているみたいです。
本当ですか？
偶然の可能性もあるんですが、先日俺が病気で休んだ日、夕方にあの二人がお見舞いに来たんです。
あの二人？
レナとミオンです。そしてそこで大石さんと一緒に昼飯を食ったことを正されました。
それで
お見舞いってことでおはぎを置いていったんですが、その中に針が入ってたんです。偶然飲み込まずに済みましたが、これってやっぱり脅迫でしょうか？
その針は？
よく見かけるような普通の裁縫針のようでした。糸を通す穴が開いていて。
違いますよ、前原さん。針です。証拠になります。脅迫だと立証できるかもしれません。その針はありますか？
That's right. That's it. I dropped the receiver and rushed downstairs. When I tossed the mochi, I'd overlooked it out of terror. But that needle was a valuable piece of evidence. Let's see, I threw the mochi and the needle at the wall together. If it was there, then it would be on the living room wall. But they cleaned it up. But my prudent mother had cleaned up the living room wall and there was not a trace of mochi left on it. Could it be that it dropped between the gap between the wall and the carpet? I frantically searched, running my palm along the carpet, but nothing turned up. I tried moving around the sofa and the desks, pulling the carpet, and then flapping it around, but I couldn't find the needle. Did my mom clean up everything without noticing it? It was just 2 days ago. I didn't know what day they collected the burnable trash, but it may still be in the trash bin in the kitchen. I rushed into the kitchen, opened up the lid of the pail, and poured out the contents. But even at a glance, I could tell that it would be incredibly difficult to find the needle in this pile of trash. I was looking for a needle in the trash stack. I know. I'll try running my hand through it. It was a bit gross, but I was looking for a needle. I felt a small prick. If I felt a small prick, I'll be able to find it. It was a pretty tactless method, but it was the quickest. I held my breath and started striking the pile of trash with my hand. Filth flew about. There was nothing more disgusting than this, but it was not the time to be concerned with such details. I continued on for a while, but nothing turned up. I wanted to search more thoroughly, but I was still on the phone. Oh crap, I shouldn't keep Oishi-san waiting for too long. Later, when Mom got back, I'd have to ask her if there was a needle. I hastily began scribbling on the notepad affixed to the refrigerator with a magnet. Was there a needle? I scrawled the words with red pen, and I dashed back upstairs when I had been keeping Oishi-san waiting for far too long.
もしもし、どうでしたか？
見つかりません。あの時はつい気が動転していて。
そうですか。見つかればでいいんです。保管しておいてくださいね。
That's right. If the needle wasn't the only incident. I had to tell him about this morning with the hit and run.
あと大石さん、それだけじゃないんです。実は今朝。
That van was definitely aiming for me. I could say that without question, due to the circumstances at the time.
その車のナンバープレートは見ましたか？こちらでも探してみます。
Damn. At the time, I just flipped out yelling at him, but I didn't look at the plate. What failures on my part with the needle and the plate number. I was so focused on just protecting myself that I let some of the most important details slip out of my grasp. I punched my pillow, annoyed at how worthless I was.
すみません。白いワゴン車ってこと以外はわかりません。
仕方ないことですよ、前原さん。惹かれかければ気も動転します。
やっぱりこれだって偶然じゃないですよね。
Oishi-san started to hem and haw over at the other end. I could imagine him folding his arms.
あと、レナの様子もやっぱり怪しいです。
それはどんな感じですか？
What Rena said on the way home today, asking why I was so much like Satoshi-kun. Now I could see it with confidence. That Rena knew what happened to Satoshi. She knew that there was more to it than him just simply disappearing.
レナは知っています。去年の鬼隠しにあったサトシのことを何か知っています。
それは具体的にどういうことですか？
レナが言うには、俺はサトシとそっくりらしいんです。このまま行くと、俺もサトシと同じ運命をたどると、そんな感じのことを言うんです。
運命ですか？具体的にどんな運命をたどるか言及しましたか？
天候と。
天候？
レナは、サトシは転校したって言ってるんです。で、俺もこのままだと転校しちゃうぞって。
Oishi-san let out a stern sigh and then grumbled loudly.
前原さん、それはおそらく何かの脅迫、もしくは警告ですね。
俺もそう思ってます。
At that point, I started to think, would it be prudent to sum up everything that had happened until now as the machinations of some human perpetrator? Other than the theory of it being Rena and the others, I was left with the Oyashiro-sama's curse actually existing as the only explanation. Of course, I couldn't tell that to Oishi-san. Except Rena's strange behavior could be the proof of either scenarios. Whether it was Oyashiro-sama's curse being real or everything being a part of a conspiracy committed by all the villagers, Rena was involved. Rena had to know something. Rena was suspicious. What exactly was Rena? I couldn't help but think that she was somehow involved with the prior string of mysterious deaths. I seem to recall that Oishi-san had admitted that he had dug into Rena's past a little. He was probably just downplaying it when he said a little, meaning that he had actually dug pretty deep, most likely. I wanted to hear about Rena. I wanted to know what happened at her previous school, among other things that were still unknown to me. If Rena was somebody I should suspect, no, not that. I wanted to know the truth. Tonight I was alone in this huge house. Even though I said I couldn't count on them, I had lost the security I felt I had just by my parents being around. It wasn't like this house was some sort of fortress or castle. If a malicious person decided to use brute force, they'd easily gain entry. There was no other residences close to the Maebara residence. No one would be able to hear anything, no matter how loud it was. I had never felt such resentment towards my father's artistic temperament, and the fact that he had his house built on such a remote location as it did right now. Well, I think my stomach just dropped. I wondered if I would still be here by tomorrow morning. So I had to ask, right now, because I had no idea when the next chance would come.
大石さん、聞きたいことがあるんです。隠さないでくださいね。
ええ、何でも聞いてください。
Even though he was so far away on the other end of the line, this was the most reliable he had ever felt. I wanted to ask about Rena, about what happened at her previous school.
実はレナの
I noticed a sound that had been going on for a while now. Since I was so focused on the call, I hadn't paid attention to it first, but I finally realized that it was the doorbell. The time was 7 o'clock. It was past the time the postman would be making a delivery, and past any sensible time that a neighbor would for a neighbor to be visiting. I considered just acting like nobody was home, but that wouldn't be good. That would ruin all the work I put into making look my parents were home. I needed to answer the door.
もしもし、前原さん。
すみません。誰か来たみたいですので、ちょっと玄関に行ってきます。
お客さんですか。すみません、すみません。今夜のお電話はこれくらいにしましょうか。
That would be a problem.
いえ、すぐ戻りますから。電話はこのままでいいですか？
はいはい、構いませんよ。
I dropped the headset on my bed and dashed down to the door. I needed to make up a good excuse to get them to leave. I had a hunch. It was the lady who called right before Oishi-san did. In which case, it would be one of the neighbors who's friends with my mom. I'll just say Mom isn't feeling well and went to bed early. That would be the easiest option. It'd be hard for her to ask me to wake up my mom if she's not feeling well. The bell continued to ring at regular intervals. If someone didn't answer after you rang the bell so much, you'd normally give up and go home, wouldn't you? Without removing the chain, I opened the door slightly and peered out at the visitor. A chill ran down my spine. I knew it. Somewhere deep inside, I had prepared for this moment. I had tried to escape by imagining that it was the easiest person to deal with, one of my mom's friends.
こんばんは。
And it was Rena.
レナ。
There shouldn't be any reason for Rena to come over at this hour. The timing also made me feel uneasy. Because it was just as I was about to ask Oishi-san about Rena. I wish I would have chalked that up to mere coincidence. But those unsettling words from Mion several days ago echoed back to me.
さてね。おじさんにわからないことはないからね。
レナ一人。
うん。
It seems that Mion wasn't with her. But that didn't change the situation at all.
何しに来たんだよ。
ねえ、ケイチくん。ちゃんとドアを開けてお話ししたいな。レナは玄関に入っちゃダメなのかな
It was true that the speaking through a chain door wasn't the right way to talk to a classmate. But
うち夜は必ずチェーンかけてるんだよ。気にすんなよ。
なら仕方ないかな。
But she kept smiling at least, and her effort to keep that smile up was quite pitiful. Even though she was tugging at my heartstrings, I didn't lower my guard. As long as I stayed like this, even if it made my heart ache, my life wasn't in danger. What I really feared was more than the possibility of the hoodlums would assault me if I removed this chain. Was trusting Rena even enough to remove the chain and having my friendship betrayed. As long as the chain wasn't unlatched, even if it made my heart ache, I wouldn't have to deal with being betrayed by Rena. Since it didn't seem like I'd remove the chain from her silent urging, she appeared to give up on trying to get into the entranceway.
あのさ、ケイチ君、ご飯食べた？
No, I haven't. Since my mom wasn't here, dinner wouldn't be ready no matter how long I waited. I laid down when I got home and was woken up by the phone and didn't have a chance to eat since I used up all that time talking. I was going to have cup noodles in any case. I could just eat one whenever I wanted to.
いや、まだだよ。それがどうしたよ。
じゃあよかった。これ見て。お惣菜とか持ってきてあげたの。お台所とか貸してくれれば、お味噌汁も温めてあげられるよ。
いいよ、そこまでしてくれなくても。
でも、お豆腐もお野菜もたっぷりなの。ケイチ君、そういうの嫌いかな。
There's no way I wouldn't like that. I love miso soup with lots of ingredients. White radish, carrots, burdock root, and potatoes. Dense and fibrous root vegetables. Yeah, that miso soup looks incredible.
ご飯も持ってきてあげたから、レンジで温めればすぐ食べられるし。
Without a doubt, rice needs miso soup. Stuffing rice down your gullet, sipping miso soup in between various bites, ravenous bites. It sounds so good. Oh yes, how wonderful it is to be born Japanese.
それからね、またお漬物を作ってきたんだよ。今度は山菜のお漬物なの。
Before I had moved here to Hinamizawa, I scoffed at the mountain vegetables called sansai. But I was captivated by their charm for the first time I tried them. Such a deep yet light flavor. These so-called supermarket vegetables taste rough and overpowering in comparison. If you had to describe them, then they were vegetables for the uninitiated. To become an expert, such as myself, you first had to partake of sansai. It was common knowledge around here that the Ryugu family's traditional pickles were wonderfully delicious. No matter what kind of pickles they were, they'd go so well with that fluffy white rice.
それからね。
But wait, there's more! Okay, Billy Mays. So delicious, yet it seems just so delicious. Farewell to my unhealthy self who'd said he'd just make do with cup noodles. Rena appeared to be in good spirits, and she was offering such a delicious-sounding dinner. The stress evaporated from my gut and hunger reared its voracious head. At the same time, my wariness of Rena suddenly dwindled. Rena did say she was alone. It shouldn't be a problem letting her inside. Though the possibility that it was laced with poison still hadn't been ruled out. At that moment, a cold chill ran down my spine once again. I couldn't understand why such a sensation had just occurred just then. Well, I couldn't understand why such a sensation had just occurred just then. Had occurred just then. I'm getting myself tongue-tied here. But the voice inside me, it was sounding the alarm. This happy Rena, speaking of this charming dinner, was dependent on one premise. And that premise was that tonight, dinner hadn't been made at my house, meaning it was under the assumption that my mom, who should be making it, wasn't here. At any normal household, 7 o'clock would be around the middle of dinner time. If my mom were here, we'd be eating dinner around this time as well. The fact that she brought over all the makings of a meal at this time was inherently strange. Unless she knew. Rena, did she? Did she know that my parents weren't home? But there were also the chance that this was a bluff. I had turned on the lights and a bunch of other stuff to make it seem like my parents were here. There was a chance that Rena was unsure if my parents were home. But I had to wonder. The laundry, the garage, the evening paper. There were plenty of signs of them being hastily tidied up. It was hard to say that Rena didn't have the chance to determine if my parents were here or not. But there was no reason for me to confess that right now. I should try holding on to that fact as long as I could. First of all, the chain was still latched. As long as I didn't take it off, Rena wouldn't be able to do anything to me.
Ah, ありがたいんだけどさ、もう少しで夕飯ができるみたいなんだよ。
そうなの？そうなの？
せっかくで申し訳ないんだけどさ、
Unable to think of a good way to refuse, my words trailed off weakly.
でもちょっとはおかずになると思うな。
悪いけど間に合ってるよ。うちのお袋ってさ、結構おかずをいっぱい作るんだよ。だから。
おかずあるの
？Uh-oh, things are getting very interesting here. With a smile that bordered on a cringe, I dodged her questions, apathetically, apologetically. But the feeling I tried to ignore began creeping back up again. As if I spoke if my mom was settling down dinner right now, but I didn't mesh well with what Rena was saying. If Rena was still talking to me, Rena was still talking as if she was aware for some obvious fact, and that I was aware of as well.
ケイチ君もおかずとか作れるんだね。何を作ったのかな？
いや、別に俺が。
Rena had assumed out of nowhere that I made the dishes. No, not so much that I made them. I'd made them, but rather that my mom hadn't.
本当に作ったの？おかず。ケイチ君が？
だから、俺が作ったんじゃないよ。お袋が作った。いや、作ってるんだよ。今。だからさ、悪いけど、レナの持ってきてくれたのは食べられないんだよ。
Rena fell silent at that moment. At that moment, I felt that the light had suddenly disappeared from her eyes.
ケイチ君のお夕飯、当ててみようか？
Oh snap.
なんだっていいじゃないか。
ね。
The conversation might appear natural at first glance, but Rena was firmly in control. It felt like I was being interrogated.
そのお夕飯、お湯だけで作れるんじゃないかな。
おいおい、侮るなよ。うちのお袋のスペシャルなディナーを見くびるなってんだ。そりゃもう満願全席状態ですごいのなんの。
I tried my best to put on a strong front, but I couldn't grit my teeth quite right. So instead I looked like someone who was borderline hysterical. But Rena showed no reaction whatsoever, even to that silliness.
ケイチ君、本当にお母さん、ご飯作ってってくれたの？
いや、だから、くれたんじゃなくて、今作ってるんだよ。もうすぐ晩飯に。
Rena had taken that assertion of mine that my mother was home and making dinner right now and was completely ignoring it. I could tell that the more I panicked, the colder Rena became.
ねえ、ケイイチくん。
At that moment, an uncomfortable chill crept in from the gap in the doorway.
お母さん、お家にいるのかなかな。
I couldn't keep up this charade anymore. Rena. She knew full well that my parents weren't home. But I'd come too far to admit that now. Anyway, my parents were here and were having dinner soon. That was the situation I had concocted. So I answered. I told her she was here.
いるよ。もちろん。
I could feel the humidity drawing out from the surrounding air. Rena's eyes were becoming more frigid, piercing me with their gelid glare.
どうして？
何のことかな？
I tried acting casual, but that facade was torn off me the instant I looked into Rena's eyes. That look informed me that Rena's response faster than she could open her mouth.
どうしてさっきから嘘をつくのかなかな。
嘘なんか。
嘘だよね。
嘘なんかじゃ。
嘘だよ。
Usadale. Rena's outburst sent a jolt surging through my body. Rena and I were still separated by what few inches that slightly ajar but still chained door could afford. Despite that, I was still being cornered. My house, which I considered a safe haven until now, had become more than a dark alleyway where no one could save me.
ケイイチくんのお夕飯当てるよ。ね。
I knew now that Rena had already known that my parents would not be here tonight. But it was still strange that it had come to this. Even if she somehow knew that my parents weren't home, there was no way she could have been able to guess what I'd be eating tonight. But Rena said she'd guess. How could she guess it? How could she know it was
カップラーメン当たりでしょ。
that I was going to eat? Wait. The cooking repertoire of a man who couldn't do housework is probably nothing but cup noodles after all. Looking at this statistically, it was the most probable answer. That didn't mean she was guessing.
ラーメンだけじゃきっとお腹すくと思うな。ご飯とかも一緒の方がきっと腹持ちいいと思うよ。
Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. This was just a coincidence. Rena was still reading certain tells of mine. So the fact that she was interfering with what I had been thinking alarmed me. But it wasn't as if she could actually read my mind. If it was being read, then she was a demon. No, not a demon. Things like that. They couldn't possibly exist.
好きなの？
ラーメンがかよ。
豚骨生姜味。
Rena indicated that the point of my answer I was addressing was wrong. Her rebuttal was so short that I momentarily didn't understand the words Rena had spoken.
ごめん、レナ。今、なんて。
何が？
今さ、何が好きって聞いたんだよ。
It wasn't long before I regretted how carelessly I pushed forward with that question. It was such a simple answer. That was why I wasn't able to comprehend it.
豚骨生姜味。
Oh boy. I wondered how I appeared in the moments my mind went completely blank until the moment I was able to recover. As my field of vision began to distort, slowly swirling in a counterclockwise direction, I lost all sense of balance.
なんでそこまでわかるんだよ。
I didn't even deny it. That was the type of frenzied state I was in. How could Rena even know this? Not even caring if I mashed my head against the door, I fixated my gaze on Rena. But she didn't even flinch when she saw me do that.
確かに勝った。まとめて勝った。俺が箱買いした。それがどうしてわかるんだ。
なんでかな。不思議だね。だね。
How could you dodge the question at a time like this? The chain and door suddenly were no longer protecting me.
どうしてわかる。なぜ知ってる。答えろ。
買ったのはセブンスマートだよね。
A shiver ran up my spine. I tried covering up with an angry facade.
だからなんでわかるんだよ。
ケイイチ君の後ろずっとくっついてたから。
何を言ってんだよ。
I couldn't understand why she was saying that she'd been following me all this time.
だからレナがケイイチ君の後ろにずっとくっついてたの。
Like that night? The night that I was absorbed in my phone conversation with Oishi-san, that I didn't even sense her being there? Standing behind the door, behind me, standing there, just like that?
ケイイチ君がいろんなラーメン選んでるとこ、後ろからずっと見てたの。いろんな種類を選んでたんだよね。それでお母さんに怒られたの。高いラーメンばっかり選ぶから一種類にしなさいって。それでケイイチ君大好きな大きいカップの豚骨生姜味を選んだんだよね。レナも好きだよ、豚骨ラーメン。でも大きいカップは全部食べきれないけどね。
My brain was paralyzed, dulling my senses. It might have been a defense mechanism to diminish the fear I was feeling to non-traumatizing levels. With fear being diminished, the fog enveloping my mind was cleared away. Then I could understand what Rena was saying and started to put meaning behind her words. Even so, my fear hadn't subsided completely. It was like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, my eyes closed so I didn't have to look down. It didn't actually solve any of the basic problems. I slowly took a step backwards. As I withdrew, Rena advanced.
だからケイイチ君、ここを開けて。レナと一緒にご飯食べよう。きっと美味しいから。ね。
Rena's pale fingers squirmed through the crack in the door one at a time, as if they had a mind of their own, rattling the chain. If she had unlatched the chain from the door, a feeling of terror would have just exploded within me. But Rena didn't do that. She was simply imploring for me to remove the chain. I tried my hardest to light the fuse to the powder keg in my heart, trying again and again. Clatter, clatter. But it doesn't light. It doesn't light.
開けて。ケイイチ君。
帰ってくれ。頼むから帰ってくれ。
どうしてそんな意地悪を言うのかな。
帰ってくれ。帰れよ。帰れ。
The powder keg inside me finally went off. No smoldering, it just exploded. I tackled the door. The force through the door knocked Rena momentarily off balance. I couldn't hesitate here. I grabbed on the doorknob with both hands, planted my feet firmly, and pulled with all my might. But that slamming sound I so desired didn't happen. I could feel a tiny disturbing bit of resistance, keeping the door from closing. And the source of that was Rena's fingers. each of the fingers wriggling, squirming around like the tendrils of a carnivorous plant through the crack of the doorway.
痛いよ、圭一くん。痛い。
It wasn't a harsh shriek, but more of a yelp as she was trying to keep back. I kept on pulling the door with all my might. I didn't even realize that if I didn't loosen the pull on the door at least momentarily, Rena wouldn't be able to pull her fingers out. And that was why the door wasn't closing.
本当に痛いの、圭一くん。悪ふざけが過ぎたなら謝るよ。
I didn't care one bit for her apology. No matter how much she apologized, it didn't change what she had done up till now. It didn't change anything.
痛いの。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。
Rena couldn't leave even if she wanted to, because I trapped her fingers. Rena's white fingers had become deep red and were no longer even squirming.
ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。
Rena's apologies were occasionally twisted with pain, but like a broken record, she was intent on repeating it over and over. Go away, go away, go away. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it! I pulled on the door even harder. Finally, Rena's fingers were somehow able to slip through their imprisonment in the doorway. The moment had happened, the door closed soundly, and I could hear the thud of Rena falling on her butt on the other side. I locked the door immediately. It made a loud clunk, voicing my rejection to Rena. Rena leaned up against the door, apologizing profusely and nothing else. After confirming that it was sufficiently sealed off from her, I trudged away from the entryway. On the other side, I could still hear Rena echoing her apology. I'm sorry, those pitiful words. They would be forever seeking in my forgiveness. I didn't feel bad about this at all. But that wasn't out of any sort of malice. I felt a sort of hazy sense of relief that I was able to escape Rena. Before, Mion had threatened me in this doorway, saying there was nothing she didn't know. And just now, at the same place, Rena had told me the same thing. My feeble attempts to disguise the fact that my parents weren't home had served no purpose from the start. I should have pretended to be out and not even opened the door. My meager plans hadn't helped at all. In Hinamizawa, it was impossible to outwit them. Even though I was on the other side of the door, I wanted to get as far away from Rena as possible. 1 step, 2 steps. With each one, her sniveling apology became distant. I sprinted up the stairs and dove into my room. As you would expect, I was finally no longer to hear Rena repeating her endless apology. Diving into my bed, I was startled by the hard lump I felt. There was something in my bed. It was the receiver. I finally remembered. I was in the middle of a call with Oishi-san. Looking at the clock, apparently not much time had passed since I went downstairs. Could it be that the clock had run out of batteries? I had talked with Rena for so long. How did it almost no time pass? On the hand of the clock was ticking forward 1 second every second as usual. As I put the still warm receiver to my ear, time, which felt frozen, began to moving once again.
もしもし、大石さん、お待たせしてすみませんでした。
いえいえ、大してお待ちしていませんよ。
It became apparent that the amount of time had passed between myself and Oishi-san was different. Over the phone, I could hear an energetic voice from a sports program or something. It drove home just how far away Oishi-san really was.
今、レナが来ました。
遊びに来たんですか?
Oh, definitely came to play. She definitely came to play in that sense. I wasn't confident that I could coherently explain the situation to Oishi-san. But I didn't need to right now. Right now, I needed to know about Rena. That's right. I was planning to ask Oishi-san more about Rena. About Rena's little visit had interrupted the conversation. That was true. What was true and what was false, I couldn't tell. The one thing I knew was the single grim reality that Rena was suspicious. I might be able to figure out something if I asked Oishi-san about her. Up until now, I had regretted whenever I forced myself to ask about things that I was better off not knowing. But looking at it that way, I could say I'd hit rock bottom. There was no possible way I could feel any more regret than I did right now. No, rather. I wanted to know if there was anything beyond this I would regret more. I forget about tomorrow. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility for something to happen tonight. I wanted to know everything I could. I was absolutely not going to die like this. Not without knowing anything. I definitely won't.
リュウグレナさんのことですか？調べましたよ。まあ簡単には。
I understood that Oishi-san was talking in circles. A bit meant I dug so deep it'd be hard to discuss with you since you're her friend.
その簡単な全てを知りたいんです。
あなたが聞いて面白いような話はありませんよ。
大石さん。
I spoke as calmly as possible to Oishi-san, who was continuing to avoid the issue. And then I said it.
リュウグレナは怪しいと思っています。過去の事件がたとえお社様のたたりによるものだったにせよ、リュウグレナは関わっています。
レナさんが怪しいと思える具体的な証拠があるのですか？
The manner in which Oishi-san spoke became very firm. Do you have some sort of proof? That was him talking as a detective.
状況証拠だけです。
そうですか。
I could tell even over the phone how disappointed Oishi-san was. Pulling on the fishing line when he felt the bite only to reel in the bait. Disappointed. But ready to cast the line once more, that's how it seemed.
大石さん、目に見える証拠がなければ動けないんですか？
What I meant was, you can't come and save me without proof. I stuck that barb in there. While Oishi-san loved the roundabout ways of saying things, he understood me just fine.
大丈夫ですよ、前原さん。あなたは私が守ります。
That was not the least bit assuring. Oishi-san was just using me to continue his investigation. I was just going to get killed, and my corpse would be an important piece of evidence. That was all I was doing.
大石さんの捜査は俺の生死と無関係でしょうが、俺は死ねば終わりなんです。
Oishi-san went silent on the other end of the line. That may have been too blunt, but I didn't care. All I needed to relay to Oishi-san was that I was currently in a very dangerous position.
だから話してください。レナのこと。サトシは転校しました。多分俺もそれほど遠くない将来、レナの言う転校をするでしょう。ですが大石さんには俺の死体を見つけることもできないでしょうね。現にサトシの死体だってまだ見つけられてない。
前原さん、どうか落ち着いて。
I was already suppressing my agitation, even without Oishi-san having to tell me. It wouldn't solve anything if I continued to scream about in my mistrust in the police. It would seem that I could only depend on myself and the bat Satoshi left behind to protect myself. Then I at least wanted to know what had happened before Rena transferred schools.
つまらない話になるのは覚悟の上ですね。
Oishi-san, realizing my resolve couldn't be swayed, finally caved.
今の俺にとってつまらない話は何一つありません。 お願いします。
まずいくつかお断りすることがあります。
はい。
他言無用でお願いします。また内容には一部憶測も含まれているかもしれません。全てが真実ではないかもしれないということです。よろしいですね。
真実ではないかもしれない。言ってる意味がよくわかりません。
Hinamizawaの連続開始事件は捜査本部がありません。毎年の事件は個々に扱われています。ですから竜宮レナが捜査線に浮上したことは一度もないのです。つまりですね、
レナの調査は警察としてでなく個人として行ったということですか？
ご理解いただけて助かります。話のほとんどは電話もしくは会って聞かせてもらったものばかりです。ですから裏が取れていません。鵜呑みにしないでほしいということなんですよ。ご理解いただけますね。
全部聞いた話だけなんですか？
ええ、申し訳ないです。個人調査ですのでね。
あれ、以前レナのカルテを見たって言いませんでしたか？確かにそう聞きましたよ。
Oishi-san paused for a moment on the other end of the line.
そんなことも言いましたかね。気のせいということにしてください。
I didn't care about Oishi-san having a certain obligations and responsibilities. I also didn't care if there was no proof. Even if there were just rumors, there's no smoke without fire after all.
話してください、大石さん。
わかりました。
Oishi-san finally opened those tight lips of his. It seemed that Rena lived in Hinamizawa a long time ago. She had moved to Ibaraki Prefecture just before starting elementary school. Then, following that, right after transferring, the unfortunate accident with the breaking of the school windows happened. Then Rena confided to a doctor. It was Oyashiro-sama. This was everything I knew.
私が知る話も前原さんと大きくは変わりません。
では、どこを詳しく調べたんですか？
I didn't need to ask. It was the incident right before she transferred back to Hinamizawa.
レナが起こした事件とその後の医者での告白ですね。
はい。
大石さんはその内容を知っているからこそレナたちを疑っているんですね。
ええ、疑っています。
やはりレナたちが犯人。
ああ、いえ、疑うとはそういう意味ではないんです。
Oishi-san was the type of person to say things with confidence, but these particular words were less than reassuring.
じゃあ何を疑ってるんですか？
お社様ですよ。
え？
お社様のたたりって本当にあるのかななんてまあ。
Oishi-san's laugh was quite dry, certainly not the kind of that would make you want to join in. Oishi-san resumed the conversation about the dubious circumstances behind Satoshi's disappearance. The course of events leading to him to delve into Rena's past. Just then, there was thunder in the distance and with a heavy rain started pouring down. It came without warning, a downpour fiercely beating the ground. I left the window in my room open a crack to let the heat out. Then the violent wind danced in my room, making the curtains flap wildly.
どうしました？
あ、いえ、急にすごい雨が。すみません。どうぞ続けてください。
I got up while still on the phone and grasped the window.
はじめに事件と申し上げましたが、学校側も被害者も告発していないので、正式には事件ではないのです。でですね、この辺りがどうも関係者皆さん口が重いんですよ。被害者の一人は片目に後遺症を残すぐらい殴られているのにもかかわらずです。学校側か、もしくは表沙汰になるのを望まない何者かがいろいろ根回しをしたのかもしれませんね。またカウンセリングを担当した神経科医も職業倫理に厳格な方で。もしもし、前原さん、聞こえてます？
There was a figure of a person standing by the light near the mailbox this whole time. Even in this torrential rain, they didn't have an umbrella. They were unquestionably drenched from head to toe. In this shower, which more resembled a waterfall, droplets of water dripped down from her hair. Just standing there, both arms dangling at her side. One hand was the stack of boxes wrapped in cloth. Her eyes focused on my room, focused on me as I was about to close the window. Her mouth was methodically repeating a chewing motion. It was as if she had something hard to chew in her mouth, with her cheeks puffing out. What could she be eating over there? How could it be that at this time I was more enthralled by Rena instead of the shocking developments being brought by light to light by Oishi-san? If it had started raining, I wouldn't have gone to the window. Then I wouldn't have noticed Rena, nor would I have noticed that. Rena's mouth was moving at the same pattern. She wasn't eating something. She was repeating something. What was it? What was she repeating? To me? What was she saying? And why was I right up against the window, fixated on her?
もしもし、前原さん、聞こえてますか？もしもーし。
ごめんなさい。
え、前原さん？
ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。
もしもし、前原さん、どうしましたか？
Even in this torrential downpour, Rena was still apologizing. Her hands are like bloody. Holy smokes. The other self inside me drew the curtain hastily with my right hand, blocking my view of the outside. But even doing that, Rena's relentless apologies still reached my ears. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If I forgive you for this, will you forgive me for that? Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. I'm sorry. 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 Damn it. Why should I have to forgive her? I'm the one who wants to be forgiven. What part of me can't you forgive? I won't be killed. If you won't forgive me, then I won't forgive you either. I won't forgive. 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 Won't
前原
forgive.
さん、聞こえてるなら返事をしてください。もしもーし。
Well, everybody, thank you all for watching. This is Daaro DS, and this is the end of the chapter, with one chapter to go. We are almost there. This is episode 17 of Higurashi When They Cry, chapter 1, Onikakushi, with 7 more chapters after. An hour and 25 minutes. This has been quite a read for me. What an interesting chapter. As you can see, things are not going well for Keiichi. We'll have to see what happens next time. Thank you all for watching. This is Daaro DS, and you guys have a good one. You guys have a nice day, and I'll catch you next time.